Hi, welcome back to my channel. In this book review, it's for Thank You Next by Andie J. Christopher. In fact, it kind of reminds me of a previous book I read a couple of years ago called Thank You Next, because in that book by, Sophie Renaud, she was trying to find the right one, the protagonist in Sophie Renaud's book. In this book by Andie J. Christopher, we have Alex J. Turner, and she hasn't been able to find the right one. But what is more for Alex is, first of all, she's a divorce attorney, so she sees the worst of the worst, or the bottom of the barrel when it comes to bad relationships and bad marriages. But when she spots her ex-fiance on Say Yes to the Dress, I think that's what the show is called, she's really annoyed. Because when they were dating, he never wanted to settle down. But now he's going to get dressed and he's helping get married, and he's helping his fiance pick out a gorgeous wedding dress. Then she thinks about other relationships that she had and how some of these other relationships became marriages. So what's with it? What's the situation? Why is she not able to find the right man, the man that is going to love her forever? And why these relationships that she had before, these guys don't want to commit to her? So she comes up with a plan. She decides to interview all of her exes to find out why none of them wanted to commit to marriage. Now, there's another character. It's an up-and-coming chef named Will Harkness, and the two of them are like oil and water, and I'm taking that directly from the blurb. Meanwhile, we have Alex's grandmother, who is a great role model for Alex, and she decides that I think it's her grandmother, that Alex going about interviewing her old boyfriends and even her old fiance will do her no good, and she could get hurt. So she kind of assigns Will as Alex's babysitter. He's going to accompany her when she goes and interviews these previous exes. And there's somebody else. There's her friends Lana and Jane. So maybe between Lana, Jane, and Will, Alex will get the answers that she needs. But what Alex doesn't expect, is to find out that she's really drawn to Will. But who is Will, and why is this surprising to Alex that she's drawn to him? Well, her grandmother. Her grandmother was a very, very relationship happy person, and she had been married several times. One of the people that her grandmother married was Will's father, which made Will her grandmother's stepson. So for Will to be her grandmother's stepson, it makes it like Will is Alex's step uncle. Now, here's the meat of the story. Alex always had a crush on Will, and Will always liked Alex. That comes out later in the story, but it's not going to be a spoiler because this is a romance. So when Alex had a crush on Will and Will liked Alex, did anything happen? And why do they apparently have a lot of friction in their time together right now when Alex is searching for answers? So that's a question that I'm going to leave open-ended, and you're going to have to read the book to find out what was the hindrance, what was the wall that was between Alex and Will then, and how do things fall with them now? Now, I am going to peek over at NetGalley because I'm pretty sure NetGalley calls this a romance, but we're going to double check. I've got 2 cats. I hope they just let me make this video. Thank you, next. I'm just making sure that it's not called a women's fiction before I say the next thing. By the way, while I'm looking this up, this is a Berkeley Publishers, and yes, it is listed as a romance. I'm glad, because now I can talk a little bit more about Alex and Will. And let me tell you why I looked this up on Goodreads, in NetGalley rather. If it's a women's fiction, that doesn't always mean there's going to be happily ever after. If there's a romance, it does mean there's going to be happily ever after. So this book could read as a women's fiction because Alex is looking for answers to why her heart is broken. But it definitely had a romance vibe to me, which is why I double checked. Because I don't read a lot about the books that I select. If I'm asked to read a book for a blog tour, or there's an author that I recognize, or the blurb that I glance at looks promising, then I take it. So that's why I had that little bit of a question as to whether or not this was indeed a romance. Well, as mentioned, Alex is going about interviewing all these people, and Will's grandmother, her grandmother. And by the way, I loved Alex, I loved Will, I loved Lana, and I loved Jane. But to me, the star of this book was Alex's grandmother. Okay, she was a card. I loved her to pieces, and she was a very famous person. And she, like I said, she had a lot of relationships, and one of these relationships is what brought Will into Alex's life. Fast forward in their life, and now Will is trying to protect Alex from getting hurt. And that's basically it, you know. As I verified, it's a romance, so you know there's going to be happily ever after. So let's find out what the conflict was, what the resolution was, and how the ending went. And those are all things that you can find out if you read this book. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.